Welcome back to the Matt Luna Fishing Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Luna. Thanks for listening to this episode. Today's episode is going to be a little bit different than some of the others. It's been a while since I put out a podcast episode, and for those of you that listen consistently, I apologize for that. I've just been crazy busy, and when I did some of my YouTube videos, they just didn't translate, I guess is the right word, translate into podcasts as well as I would have liked, so I just didn't upload the audio from my YouTube videos because that's what most of my podcasts are. But going forward, I'm definitely going to try and make the podcast a higher priority and try to put out more content for you listeners, because I really appreciate everybody that listens to this podcast and I really want it to grow. I think podcasts are just going to get more and more popular, and for those of you that really follow the fishing industry, you know that there's a lot of different fishermen that have their own podcasts now, and I am one of many other people that have their own podcasts. So I'm going to put a lot of effort into trying to create some different original podcast only content. Probably going to do it while I'm driving because it's something that I can easily do while I'm driving, because it's, just talking and recording that audio. So there might be background noise or something like that, but I just got to I got to put out the content when I have the time and the ability to do so. And using that time while I'm driving is probably going to be one of the best ways that I can do that. So there's been a ton of stuff going on in the fishing industry, from MLF buying FLW. If you're not aware of that, a couple weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, something like that, it was when I was gone at the US Open, MLF bought FLW. So MLF is now going to be using the FLW, BFLs, the Costas, the Tour, all of it is going to be feeding into the Major League Fishing Bass Pro Tour. There's a bunch of different articles. I've listened to a bunch of different people talk about the entire thing, and for most of us fishermen, I don't think it's going to affect us too much. For most of us, it's benefited us because the BFLs, if you're familiar with those, the entry fees have gone down. The Costas, if you're familiar with those, the entry fees have gone down, and supposedly the payouts are going to go up. So that's going to be awesome. The guys at the tour level, they, I think, are paying a little bit more in entry fees, which is not good for them. But hopefully the additional exposure that MLF says that they're going to give those guys will pay off, and the sponsors will see that and increase their contributions to those guys. But it's going to be interesting to see how that whole thing shapes up, how it unfolds, and to see, if Major League Fishing can really have an impact on increasing the exposure and increasing the name recognition of the fishermen on that FLW tour level, and make it not appear as a AAA to the Bass Pro Tour, because 1 year ago from 2020, so 2019, for example, those guys were at the equivalent level of the Bass Pro Tour. You can think what you want about the different names and whether they're as good or not. That's all subjective and that's your own opinion. But my point is they were at the same level. It was the top level of bass fishing. And now these guys are being seen as AAA instead of that top level. And I think that's going to be one of the hard things that Major League Fishing is going to have to figure out, how to position those guys as fishermen at the top level of the sport, rather than, a lower level than the Bass Pro Tour. Because, Brian Thrift should not be considered, low AAA level compared to some of the guys on the Bass Pro Tour. Just the same as, Scott Martin, and there's probably some other guys as well that I'm forgetting, but there's some very, very good fishermen on the FLW Tour that do not deserve to be in that AAA category. So a second ago, I mentioned briefly about me being out at the US Open. A few weeks ago, at the same time that the MLF bought FLW, I was out at Lake Mead. So there was definitely a lot of chatter about MLF buying FLW, and some guys were going to be going to the FLW championship, or the Costa Championship out at Lake Cumberland, which is going on. I think today actually is the first day of competition for those guys. Some guys from the West Coast were going to be driving out to Lake Cumberland to compete because they wanted to fish, or they wanted to fish for the chance to make the Forest Wood Cup. But one of the things that MLF did when they bought FLW was got rid of the Forest Wood Cup. So there will be no Forest Wood Cup in the 2020 FLW Tour season. They are going to have an Angler of the Year championship, but the guys from the Costa level, the guys from the college fishing, all those different opportunities that FLW used to have available to people to make the Forest Wood Cup outside of the FLW Tour are now gone. So I know a lot of guys decided not to go all the way out to Lake Cumberland to fish the FLW Costa Championship because they no longer had the chance to fish or no longer had the chance to qualify for the the Forest Wood Cup. So a few weeks ago, I was out at Lake Mead for the One Bass US Open, and man, that thing was tough. I did not have a good tournament. I had a horrible finish. I was never on fish. I caught fish in practice. I found jig fish. I found crankbait fish. I found some spinnerbait fish. I found areas that had good grass. I found Senko fish that I could catch in the middle of the day, high sun, no wind. So I thought going into the tournament that I was going to be able to catch limits, which I knew was going to be a key factor in this tournament because I know a lot of guys were struggling to get bit. They were definitely struggling to catch keepers, and they were definitely struggling to get the big bites, which I could not figure out how to get a good bite or two each day. But I knew that, throwing the jig, throwing that Senko, and throwing some of those reaction baits could potentially get one of those big bites. There's no guarantees. I didn't have an area that I could go to that had big fish in it. It was just one of those luck of the draws, just hoping that, you'd fish hard, you would have your, 7-pound limit, something like that. You'd get your big bite that would push you up into that, 9-10 pound range, depending on how big that fish was. But that did not happen. I definitely thought I was going to be able to catch limits going in the tournament, but I did not know if I was going to be able to get those big bites. So tournament rolls around, and man, things changed. We had a cold front come in during practice, and I really think that hurt things, even though I was able to get bit on the final day of practice, which was right after the cold front. We had an off day between practice and the actual tournament, and something changed out there. I wasn't able to adjust, and I struggled. I could only bring in 2 keepers per day. We were able to catch fish throughout the day, but there was just tons and tons of short fish, and it was just a struggle, man. I don't really know how else to say it. It was not a good tournament. It was really tough fishing. My cumulative weight for the entire tournament was a little over 6 pounds, and in my past tournaments out at Lake Mead, one day, one bag was bigger than my 3-day total in this entire tournament. So it was brutal. $6.44 a day got you a check, and the guy that won, Nick Salvucci, he had, I think, a little bit over 11 pound a day average, maybe not even that, I'm not exactly sure, but it was just tough fishing. There's no way to get around it. It was tough to even stay mentally in it because I could not figure out what to do differently. I just think I was in the wrong areas. I think I was targeting some of the wrong stuff. I learned a lot from that tournament, but it was definitely disappointing. It was definitely tough to go out there the 2 days after. It was a 3-day tournament, and the first day I was pretty much out of it because I just had that tough of a day. I had 2 fish for a little over 2.5 pounds, and that's just, your tournament's not over. You still have the chance at Lake Mead to be able to come back, cash a check and stuff like that, but I just knew that I wasn't around the fish. It wasn't like I had fish come off. It wasn't like I had missed opportunities. I just was not around fish. I was not getting bit very well on day 1. I made some adjustments on days 2 and 3 where we caught more fish. We still could only manage 2 keepers in the boat each of those final 2 days, but we were definitely around more fish. They just weren't the right fish, and I wish that I could go back in time and do things different in practice and find some better fish and find some different structure, because I think that was part of the problem. I was really focused on the grass, but the grass was dying, so I think a lot of the fish moved out of that grass into some different types of cover, and I could have targeted that differently, and I think that would have made a difference. I mean, it could have been tough. I could have just not gotten the bites that I was looking for, but I did learn some things after talking to some other people, hearing about how people caught fish, and I kind of see how I kind of missed the boat in this tournament and missed things in practice. Well, I hope you guys enjoyed hearing some of my thoughts about the Major League Fishing MLF thing. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my US Open trip. I obviously, if you guys are listening to this podcast, you're into the audio stuff, but I really hope you go check out my YouTube channel. It's Matt Luna Fishing. You can go to YouTube, search Matt Luna Fishing. You'll find my my channel, or you can go to some of my website, mattlunafishing.com, and there's links to everything on my website. I also have some jigs that I'm selling right now that I'm taking pre-orders on. I'll be taking pre-orders through probably next week. I'm expecting a fairly large order to come in next week, so I'm waiting for that order to come in, and I'm going to buy a bunch of the material. All at one time. It keeps the cost down for me and for you guys. So if you're interested in getting in on those pre-orders, go to my website and click on the custom jig page. I'm not exactly sure what I titled it on my website, but it's order custom jig, something like that on my page. Or you can click on the shop icon, and there'll be a link at the top of the shopping page that says if you want to get the custom jigs, click here. So go check those out. They are $20 a piece, or $20 for 5 jigs. And there's an order form. You can fill it out. I'm using 6-cent skirts, owner hooks. You get to pick the jig head color, weed guard color, the skirt color. So it's pretty cool. It's custom jigs. You get to order and design them yourself. A ton of different skirt options since I'm using the 6-cent skirts. You just go on their website, search through the different skirt colors they have, pick one out that's in stock, and it all goes into the order form, and then I send you out an invoice to pay, and then I will get those made up and shipped out to you probably within the next couple weeks. It just depends on obviously how many jigs I have to make. So the more I make, the longer it's going to take me to do it, but I can't imagine it's going to take me more than a couple weeks from the time you put that order in. So I would really appreciate it if you guys did that. So go check out my website, mattlunafishing.com. You can also check me out on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. My Facebook page is Matt Luna Fishing. You can check me out on Instagram at Matt Luna Fishing, all one word. And then on TikTok, if you are new to the TikTok world like I am, my username, or whatever you want to call it, is Matt Luna Fishing _ over on TikTok. So thanks for listening to this episode. I plan on doing a lot more podcasts for you guys, but I really hope you enjoyed listening to what I've been up to lately and some of my thoughts on this MLF FLW thing. So once again, thanks for listening to the Matt Luna Fishing Podcast. Stay tuned for more episodes. Thanks. See ya.